Okay. So students, let's start the class. Today we are going to start a new chapter from the physiology portion, that is transport in plants, right. So first, before starting the chapter, you have to know what is the content of the chapter. Eto chapter ki porhim. As the name suggests, transport, right. So we will be talking about the things that are transported in a plant, and plus transporter logot kunbilak tissues related, it's always the xylem and the phloem, right. We are talking about transport of water, minerals and transport of food. So this is something that we are going to study. Together with this, what we need to study is some information about a process called as transpiration, right. Types of transpiration, Pune basic transpiration kore. So that is the content of the chapter. Now talking about transport, now what is transport? Obviously the movement from one place to another of certain types of materials, that is called as transport, right. Talking about transport, adult plant or bhitorot ki bostu transport hoy, what are the things that are transported inside the plant body? Obviously food, minerals, certain types of hormones, enzymes, etc., right, from one place to another. Next point is, whenever we talk about transport, it could be divided into two types of transport, that is short distance transport and long distance transport, right. Short distance transport mane ki, we are talking about the transport of certain substances from one cell to the next cell, and the other one is a long distance transport. Long distance transport boli koala, it's the entire plant body, right. So two types of transport could be seen in case of a plant. Talking about short distance transport keneke hoy, eta cell pra antu cell le transport to keneke hoy by certain physical process, like I think you have heard about this diffusion, osmosis, right. So diffusion, osmosis, water potential gradient, eblak ki hoy, the methods through which short distance transport occurs. Next, talking about long distance, first long distance boli kole, we remember a word that it is called as translocation, right. When do we use the word translocation? Translocation mane ki, eta jega pra antu jega le bostu khini joa mane to translocation hoy. But whenever we use this word, we understand that this time the movement is not of a single molecule, it is a bulk of substances that are going from one place to another. So long distance transport ki hoy, it is not a single molecule that goes, bahut bilak bostu eta jega pra antu jega le jabo, that is called as translocation. So we have to remember the word bulk. Bulk movement, bulk flow, mass flow, eblak words ki hor logot associated translocation. Next, together with translocation, we have another word that is called as, it can be either unidirectional or it can be bidirectional. Transport of substances in a plant, kisuman bostu unidirectionally jay aru kisuman bidirectionally. For example, if you are talking about the water transport, water to xylem e loi jabo, it's always key unidirectional na bidirectional. Obviously unidirectional, roots or pra different parts of the plant body le gusi jay, right. But instead, if you are talking about food translocation, then tetahole bidirection ka leaves bilake produce kore, and then it has to go to each and every part together, it has to come to the root section also. So these are the words that we have to understand. Next, diffusion, osmosis, water potential gradient, ekhini ami details ot poribo lagibo, right. Ki hoy bostu, what is diffusion pressure, examples of diffusion, significance of diffusion. Similarly, in case of osmosis also, osmosis ki hoy, osmotic pressure ki hoy. I think you have heard something called as reverse osmosis also. So okuman informations from this part we need to study. But before going into details, aru duta bostu poribo lagibo. One is called as permeability and the other is called as imbibation, right. So short distance details of koribo lagibo, long distance details of koribo lagibo, kintu permeability aru imbibation we need to talk about. Permeability, we have already read all these chapters before, right. So we have an idea. So permeability boli kole, again those four words, no, what is permeable, semi permeable, impermeable, differentially permeable or selectively permeable, etc. Next is hekhini pora questions ahe, examples khini important hoy. Give an example of a permeable membrane, give an example of a semi permeable membrane. So permeability pora okol examples khini eji hude. As far as imbibation is concerned, what is imbibation we will be discussing. Imbibation, yeah, it's a swelling of a substance by the absorption of a liquid, right. That is called as imbibation. Imbibation logot imbibation pressure related hoy ase. Significance of imbibation is very important because it is the initial step in the germination of acid, initial step in the absorption of water, etc. So this is the thing that we will study, and then we will go to diffusion, right. So heading kora transport in plants or first likha father of plant physiology. PDF to already paye go satmalke. I don't think we need to write each and every sentence. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to write each and every sentence, or there are certain sentences that you can write it from the PDF also? Ne double koratke yat likhai bhal. ইয়াত লিখাই ভাল ঠিক আছে ওকে ডাজন্ট মেটাৰ সো কিছুমান পইণ্টছ যোনখিনি ধৰা PDF ৰ পৰা লিখিব পৰা ব্ল্যাঙ্ক ৰাখি দিবা ঘৰত গৈ পেলাই লিখিবা মেজৰিটি অফ দ্য থিংছ উই আৰ গোইং টু ৰাইট ইন দ্য ক্লাছ ৰাইট ওকে সো লেটস স্টাৰ্ট উইথ দ্য বেসিক থিং So, transport could be of two types, short distance and long distance. What we understand, transporting of substances from one cell to the next cell, short distance, to the entire plant body, long distance, right. Tinta physical process, diffusion, osmosis, water potential gradient. Out of this, most probably diffusion and osmosis is something that is very common and we have already studied. Okoman notun zedi porha nai, that is water potential gradient, right. It is based on these three factors we can decide whether a substance will move from one cell to another cell. Duta cell ase, he cell to bitor kuntu cellor pra kuntu le jabo, depends on what we will be studying all these things, right. It might be because of diffusion that the movement occurs, it might be because of osmosis, or it might be because of water potential gradient also. Together with that, since we will be talking about diffusion, we have to talk about something called as DPD also, diffusion pressure deficit, right. So, eta cellor pra antu cell le pani jabo ne na jai, kuntu cellor pra kuntu cell le jabo. Generally, we talk about two things, either you study the DPD of a cell or you study the water potential gradient of a cell, right. What is DPD, what is water potential, we will be doing it. Is this over? Right. Okay. In this long distance ki mone rakhiba, translocation mone rakhiba, mass flow to mone rakhiba. Ha. Soap hobo, everything. So, right. Okay. So, ekhine details kora agote, as I said, no, permeability we need to know something. Is this over? Ekhine hol. So, heading koriba permeability. Permeability definition lagibo niki. What is permeability? It is a process through which exchange of materials across a membrane takes place. Duta cell ase, cellor majot membrane ase, hey membrane khonere ki humabo ki ulabo. This process is called as what? Permeability. It's nothing but the exchange, right. Okay, is a sarikon membrane as a permeable, impermeable, semi-differentially by abler but selectively. Tar definition lagibo? No, it's only the examples likile hobo. Do we understand the word permeable membrane? Permeable ekon membrane or permeable ketia kom? When is a membrane considered to be permeable? It is considered to be permeable when it allows the in and out of any type of a substance. Right, it can be a solid, it can be a gas, it can be a liquid, right. So, post to jodi in and out jabo pare, tetihale tak ami ki boli kom permeable. So, that is the example ki hoy cell wall. So, definition to jani ne likhi dibo laibo. I think it's understood, right. Okay, then permeable membrane or ota example hoy gol. Next likha semi permeable membrane by impermeable. Okay, semi-permeable membrane, or what is the point that you have to remember? When is a membrane called as semi-permeable? When it allows the movement of only the liquid particles, right? Okol solvent jabo paribo ba solvent boli koleo belek hobo. So it is only the liquid or solvent that could pass through a membrane, that is called as semi-permeable. Solid jabo paribo niki noare, right? And whenever we talk about examples, aru eta kotha ki, any membrane that is used to demonstrate the process of osmosis is called as a semi-permeable membrane. Osmosis definition if you remember ki asile movement through a membrane no membrane ekhon lagiboi tetia he osmosis hobo right. So any membrane that is used to demonstrate the process of osmosis is considered as a semi permeable membrane. Osmosis or ki flow in and out ki hoy, it is only the liquid, solid or to osmosis no hoy, right. So permeability is a process through which substances either enter or exit from a membrane, that is called as permeability, depending on the membrane. Since the process is entirely dependent on the membrane, so there could be 4 types of membrane: permeable membrane, semi-permeable, impermeable and selectively permeable. As far as the biological membranes are concerned, all the membranes are generally examples of selectively permeable. It is also called as differentially permeable. Now, as we understand, permeable, we understand solute, liquid, solvent, any molecule can pass through. This is only solvent, so we have written the movement of only solvent in case of semi. In case of impermeable, eku to movement no hobo, in and out eku no hoy, so it's called as impermeable. Suberized cork cells, suberin deposition thake, ekane in and out eku no hoy. Next we have selectively permeable. As the name suggests, this membrane is supposed to be selective in nature. Now when we talk about it as selective in nature, ki select kore? It is selective in nature. I will decide as to what I will take. So, if you are talking about selective nature of the membrane, select ki kore, liquid na solid, it is always the solutes, right? Kuntu solute molecule pass hobo. Eta membrane I will select, and so that is what is called as a selectively. So, this is one word that you need to remember. Selective in nature, ki select koribo, kuntu solute particle ahibo, hetu he select koribo, right? And these are the examples. Nothing much to explain. Kali examples are important. Examples kini poriba. Next likhiba imbibation. Is this over? Kun kini last or kini? Na agoto hua nasile. Number 4 opra 3 loke hoisile. Thik ase. देखिए लो okay. So, the next one is imbibation. Imbibation ki hoy, we do not have to remember the definition obviously, imbibation ki hoy, je we have a dry substance absorbing water and swelling up without forming a solution, that is called as imbibation. Okol jodi ami etu koi thoi diu, dry substance taking in water, right, that would be a wrong statement. Kiho karne, if you are taking the example of sugar and water, sugar to dry substance, pani thoi dila, hi ki ho gol? Prothom de water loi absorb hoy, tapsat ki koribo? Dissolve hoi jabo. So, jodi dissolve hoy, that is not an example of imbibation. It should not get dissolved, instead it should swell up, right, that is imbibation. Second, imbibation boli kole duta word, one is called as imbibate and the other is called as imbibate, the liquid part and the solid part. Kuntu bostu ahise aru kune loise. So, we have two terms for that. Third point is significance of imbibation poribo lebo. Fourth is something called as imbibation pressure. Eta substance, eta dry substance of jeta liquid to humai ahibo inside the cell, obviously it will exert a pressure, and that pressure because of imbibation is called as imbibation pressure. Right, imbibation hoar karone junto pressure develop korise coat develop korise solid substance er bhitorot, and that pressure is called as imbibation pressure. Together with that, we have also we have to talk about something called as heat of wetting. Heat of wetting tamane ki hoy, we have an example called as kneading of wheat flour. Ata marile ki hoy, imbibation process hoy noy, ata to ki hoy, it's a solid thing. You give in water, the molecules will get absorbed and then it will swell up, right. That is the process of imbibation. During that process ki hoy, ata to jodi besike mari thaka no, tar majot ki hobo, it will become hot. Normal powder to junto temperature ase marar pisot hetu bostu okman gorom hoi jan naje. He je gorom to hol kiho karne hol? Because of a heat that is generated because of the process. Kinetic energy of water. And so, water humai is a solid molecular, water ki ase duta energy, potential energy and kinetic energy. Potential energy to thaki jabo, because of kinetic energy it will have a tendency to move out. Kintu atatur bhitoror pora pani khini ulai ahibo paribo niki? Noare. So, what will happen to that energy? Kinetic energy to ki hobo? It will get transformed into heat energy. So, ultimately the dough that we make becomes comparatively warmer as compared to the powder that we have taken, right. So, ekhini hol imbibation or logot related things that we need to know. Likhi loa. Okay. So, generally when we talk about imbibation, we generally talk about water, but it is not necessary that each and every substance will imbibe water. Depending on different substances, beleg substance beleg liquid absorb koribo pare. Kintu the common thing that we are talking about is water. So, in the definition generally we talk about water. Kintu kisuman substance eneko ase jone niki kerosene imbibe koribo pare. For example, if you are talking about a rubber, right, rubber etukur panit thoi dile swell koribo niki nokore, kintu if you put that rubber in kerosene it will swell up. So what does it signify? It signifies that depending on substance to substance the imbibement is different, right. Okay. Some important points. So, talking about the power of imbibation depending on the substance, it is part of a question ahise, imbibation power car besi as compared. eto part busila no, that's right, yapra important hoy eto kudiba, and I think that part is also understood. Duta word monot rakhibo laibo, imbibent or imbibate. Next we have something called as the imbibation pressure. The pressure developed due to imbibation is called as imbibation pressure. It is also called as matrix potential. If you have read water potential before, তেতিয়া তাত এটা word আছে that is called as matrix potential. Water potential যদি পঢ়িছিলা, এটো পঢ়িছিলা নেকি? Right? So তাতে এটা factor হিচাপে কি আছে? Matrix potential. Osmotic potential আছে, matrix potential আছিলে আৰু pressure potential আছিলে, right? এখিনিটো বুজাবলে বেছি নাই, so we'll just write the note, okay? So examples of imbibation বুলি ক'লে generally we remember two examples. এটা কি swelling of the gram seed. Gram seed বুটটো পানীত থৈ দিলে swell কৰে, that's the most common example you remember. And second example is the bending of doors and windows during rainy season. বৰষুণৰ বতৰত কি হয়, দৰজা খিৰিকীবিলাক, কাঠৰ দৰজা খিৰিকীবিলাক মাৰিবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিলে এটা শব্দ ওলায়, right? You'll have to exert a little more pressure as compared to the summer days. So what happens exactly is, if the doors and windows, obviously they are made of wood, right? So woodor bostu, that's a solid part, borokhon dile ki hobo, they will take in water and swell up. Jetia hei kattukur swell up kore, tahator jintu frame ase, he frame to nate, right? So it exerts a pressure, we have to exert a pressure and it develops a sound also. So the swelling of doors and windows during rainy season is an example of key imbibation, right? আটাটো হ'ব নিডিং এক্সাম্পল, কিন্তু কমন এক্সাম্পল বুলি ক'লে আমি এইটা ওপৰত হেৰি কৰোঁ হা। What will happen likhi diya nai aru, it's well understood, no? Gram seeds thole ki hobo, it will swell up. There's no point of writing it down, just remember the example. Question to keneke ahibo pare, the gram seeds immersed in water is an example of which process? Imbibation, diffusion, osmosis, water potential gradient, etc., etc. So the answer would be imbibation. Second, wooden doors and windows during rainy season swells up because of imbibation. Remember the word resurrection plants. Resurrection plants, plant kingdomot ami koisilu. What is resurrection? Morar pisat ako ebar jiai joa, right? That is called as resurrection. We have given the example of Selaginella, right? Certain types of lichens also. Okay, so out of the significance there are so many, out of that 1 and 2 very very important question I have, what is the initial step of absorption? We know a root or a plant will absorb water from the soil, and who absorbs this? Obviously the root or the root hair, right? So the root and or the root hair cells are considered to be dry cells, and that is the reason why we apply water to the soil, and from the soil dry substances take in water, right? That process is called as imbibation. So প্ৰথমতে পানীটো কোনে absorb কৰিব লাগিব? root cells বিলাকে, and first process is because of imbibation. Due to imbibation it has taken in the water has entered the cell, hey cell to concentration besi hoi gol, and then ultimately because of concentration, because of diffusion, maybe osmosis, it will move to the other cells. Kintu what is the first cell? What is the first step of absorption? It is always imbibation. So water absorption in case of a plant কিছুমান processor karone hoy. Kenuka process? Short distance transport karone hobo pare, diffusion karone hobo pare, osmosis karone hobo pare. So plug factors ekeloge mili pelai water absorption hoy. Jeneke diffusion, osmosis, water potential gradient, etc. Everyone is responsible for the process of absorption, but we have to talk about the first step. The first step je he dry bostu roye je pani lole he bostu tu ki hoy? Imbibation. So initial step of water absorption. Similarly, initial step of seed germination also. Why is it considered as an initial step of seed germination? Because we know whenever a seed has to germinate, I mean normally ki koru kisuman seeds kini ani pelai panit bhijai thoi diu ne nidu. Dry seeds we buy it from the market, we soak it in water for one night, and then next morning we may sow it down, right? Here's a dry seed kini ani pelai panit humai thoi dilu kiho karone tholu enekwa niki panit nothole hi germinate nokoribo tenekwa to nohoy. In nature what happens? The seeds will fall down to the ground and automatically and it will germinate into a plant. Kintu ami ghorot anile ki koru? Generally if you talk about those hak sakor jona mustard seeds or maybe spinach, etc., we buy it from the market, we soak in water for one night and then we do it. Kiho karone? Soak nokorileo to germinate hobo. Hukai to keteo na jay. Nature ki hoy? Nature jeta fruit to burst hoy, tarpor seeds bilak pori jay no? Seeds bilak kot pore matit. তো seeds বিলাক তো হুকাই না যায়, তাৰ পৰা নিজে নিজে প্লান্ট এডাল হয়। তো আমি আনি পেলাই সিডটো কিহৰ কাৰণে পানীত থৈ দিও? পানীত নুঠোৱাকেও তো জাৰ্মিনেট কৰিব। পানীত থলে কি হয়? The process of germination will fasten. Why? Because it will help in the rupturing of the seed coat. এটা seed germinate কৰিব লাগিলে, তাৰ পৰা বেবি প্লান্ট এডাল ওলাব লাগিলে, তাৰ seed coat টো ভাঙিব লাগিব। আর seed coat টো কেতিয়া ভাঙিব? By absorption of water. In natural conditions what happens? It will wait for the rain. বৰষুণ দিব, হি absorb কৰিব, তেতিয়াহে germination হ'ব। কিন্তু in our case what we do, we want the process to be faster. So what we do, we soak it in water so that it absorbs the water, rupture the seed coat, and ultimately the process of germination starts. So initial step of seed germination ki hoy? Imbibation. And what we understand by initial step? Rupturing of the seed coat, right? So this was all about the two processes, that is imbibation and permeability. Next we have to talk about in details the process by physical process, diffusion, osmosis or water potential. If this is over, diffusion heading koriba. Ekhini hol last point likhiba. Over. Okay. Now talking about diffusion, diffusion or whenever we talk about diffusion, it is a process of movement. Movement of what? Movement of molecules or ions from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Concentration of what? High concentration or low concentration, no? Concentration of what? Generally, if you are talking about solid things, high concentration of solute to low concentration of the solute, right? The normal thing that we talk about. Okay. So, diffusion boli kole, the first word that comes to our mind is concentration. Concentration difference eta thakibo lagibo, tetiya he diffusion process to hobo. Jodi concentration na thake, diffusion nohoy, right? Next is, the second question that is asked is about certain examples of diffusion. The most common example of diffusion that we talk about is diffusion বুলি ক'লে এটা এক্সাম্পল কোৱা যোনটো নেকি আমি ডেইলি লাইফত দেখা পাওঁ burning of the incense stick, perfume, etc. Or you can put a dye crystal in a bucket of water and then it becomes red or yellow, that is because of diffusion. So, these are examples of diffusion. Third is, there are certain conditions required for diffusion. Hobo lagile ki hobo lagibo. Next is diffusion faster ketia hoy. So, these are the things that we will study, and together with that something called as diffusion pressure and diffusion pressure deficit, right? Ekini whole contents. So, actually etu part of nohoy notes khini jikhini dim ebar pori gole hoi jay, thik ase eko iman beshi tough nohoy, conceptual nohoy. Diffusion কাৰ হয়, which state of matter undergoes diffusion? যেনেকৈ osmosis বুলি ক'লে অকল liquids, no? ঠিক তেনেকৈ diffusion বুলি ক'লে which state of matter undergoes diffusion? All, solid, liquid, gas, সবৰে diffusion হয়। তাৰ ভিতৰত সবতছে বেছি কাৰ হ'ব? Obviously gas. Some general points about diffusion. Important key, obviously diffusion rate कार बेसी हेतु पर question आए. Next is this line. Diffusion pressure, no? We know that diffusion is something that is seen in all the states of matter, solid, liquid and gas. If we are talking about liquid, we can talk about solvent and we can talk about solution also. Solvent is also a liquid and solution is also a liquid. Solvent or diffusion hobo, solution or diffusion hobo, diffusion car besi hobo. It is always the pure solvent that will diffuse more, right, as compared to the solvent. What happened to him? What happened? Not feeling well? বুঝা নাই ন দুটা কন্টেইনাৰ লোৱা ঠিক আছে দুটা কন্টেইনাৰ বা দুটা জেগা লোৱা য'ত নেকি এটাত অকল পিওৰ সলভেন্ট আছে পিওৰ সলভেন্ট মানে কি সলিউটছ নাই ৰাইট আৰু সলিউশনত কি থাকিব সলিউটছ থাকিব সলভেন্টটো থাকিব ৰাইট দুইটা বস্তু মিলি পেলাইহে সলিউশন হয় আমি এটা বস্তুক সলিউশন কেতিয়া কম য'ত নেকি তাৰ লিকুইড পাৰ্টিকেলো থাকিব আৰু সলিড পাৰ্টিকেলো থাকিব ৰাইট কিন্তু যেতিয়া পিওৰ সলভেন্ট বুলি কম পিওৰ সলভেন্ট বুলি ক'লে অকল লিকুইড থাকিব সো কনসেন্ট্ৰেচন কাৰ বেছি পিওৰ সলভেন্টত লিকুইড বেছি সো হি বেছিকে মুভ কৰিব সলিউশনত কি আছে সলিড পাৰ্টিকেলসও আছে সো সলিড পাৰ্টিকেলসৰ মুভমেন্টটো কম হ'ব নহয় এজ কম্পেয়াৰ্ড টু দ্য লিকুইড right so solid to অকমান হলেও তো তা মুভমেন্ট হিন্ডাৰ কৰিব ন সো অকল যদি ওয়াটাৰ অকল যদি লিকুইড পাৰ্টিকেলস থাকে তাহাতৰ মুভমেন্টটো ফাস্টাৰ হ'ব এজ কম্পেয়াৰ্ড টু আ সলিউশন হেতু আমি পিছত পঢ়িম ইয়াতে আমি যেটো আমি সলিউট আৰু সলভেন্টৰ ডিফিউজনৰ কথা কৈছো আহিবটো হেতু আমি উইল বি টকিং अबाउट ডিপিডি ঠিক আছে বেছি বুজিব লাগা নাই so we are just writing the note ঠিক আছে so there are certain factors on which the rate of diffusion depends upon if the temperature is more the diffusion rate would also be more সেই কাৰণে আমি কি কৰো we burn the incense stick burn কৰিলে কি হ'ব তাৰ molecules বিলাক spread হৈ যাব right similarly density and diffusion also has a relation density it's inversely proportional and this is something what is called as Graham's law as far as what is Graham's law is concerned obviously not related with biology so biology to ami Graham's law deduction process to ami noporu yar pra question ki ahise Graham's law is related with which physical process in case of transport Graham's law is related with diffusion that is the only statement that you will remember or A to Z D then you have to identify that we are talking about the Graham's law being seen in the process of diffusion right next is talking about the medium I think the line is understood right kiba bujhi na pale please ask okay huh oh it one asile okay the next factor is distance so what would be the relation between distance and diffusion distance বেছি হলে diffusion rate to কম হ'ব সেই কাৰণে when you burn an incense stick প্ৰথমতে গুন্ধখিনি ক'ত পাও nearer and gradually it spreads to other areas So these are the factors which affects diffusion. That is different. কিন্তু actually চাবলৈ হলে দূৰত বেছি গোন্ধ নাপায়, ওচৰতে গোন্ধ পায়, কিন্তু ইমান বেছি ফ্যাক্টৰস আছে নহয় আমাৰ নাকটোৱে ধৰিব নোৱাৰে যে কোনটো গোন্ধ লওঁ। সো ইট স্প্ৰেডস উইথ দ্য এয়াৰ। তাহাঁতৰ ঘৰততো চিকেন বনোৱা নাই, সো সেইখিনি এটমস্ফিয়াৰটো নাই, সেইকাৰণে ইয়াৰ গোন্ধটো তালে গুচি যায়। কিন্তু ইট ইজ নট লাইক দ্যাট দ্য স্মেল ইজ নট দেয়াৰ এট দ্য প্লেচ ৱে ইউ আর কুকিং ইট, তাতো আছে, কিন্তু তাত ফ্যাক্টৰসবিলাক কি হৈছে সব মিক্সচাৰ হৈ আছে, ৰাইট? মিক্সচাৰ হৈ পেলাই আমি বেছিকৈ আইডেণ্টিফাই কৰিব নোৱাৰোঁ। আৰু যিমান বতাহলৈকে যাব সিমান চিকেনটো লুভ লাগি লাগি গৈ থাকিব ন। অ'কে, চ' এইটো হ'ল দিছ পাৰ্ট ইজ অভাৰ। কি অঁ একদম ধুনীয়াকৈ, আৰু লাগিলে ঘৰতে বনোৱা, তথাপি সেইটো বেছি লুভ লাগে বেলেগে বনোৱাটো। দিছ ইজ অভাৰ। Nothing to explain. Understood. Significance of diffusion is health. Diffusion is the process through which exchange of gases takes place. Carbon dioxide, oxygen are exchanged because of diffusion. Distribution of hormones inside the plant body, obviously because of diffusion, high concentration to low concentration. Anyhow, if you know about hormones, I think you know the statement. Hormones don't synthesize oil. It is not that area where they act upon. It is carried to a different area, and that is the place where they act upon. So high concentration to low concentration side. And next we have the process of transpiration. Transpiration we understand, translocation also we understand. So these processes are also because of or is also helped by diffusion. So there are certain conditions for diffusion. Diffusion process to hopo lakile. What is the first condition? Concentration gradient. What we understand by the word gradient? Difference. concentration difference থাকিব লাগিব তেতিয়াহে diffusion process টো হ'ব so what is the first condition that is required right Okay, talking about the conditions for diffusion, concentration gradient is a must. Second is smaller molecules diffuse faster because it depends on the size of the molecule that is diffused, and this is a point that is important. Lipid soluble substances always diffuses easily across a membrane as compared to the hydrophilic substances. Lipid soluble, those are also called as lipophilic, right? If a substance is lipophilic, then obviously it will be hydrophilic. It cannot be dissolving at the same rate in water and lipids together, right? So if you are talking about a substance, etu dhoro ekhon membrane hoy, this is cell A aru ekhon cell B, majot ki thakibo, cell membrane thakibo. So X is the substance that needs to get diffused to the cell B. If X is hydrophilic ne lipophilic, kuntu hole easily diffuse hobo, it's always lipophilic. What is the reason behind? Hydrophilic kyo nohoy, lipophilic kyo hoy? Karon yate ki thakibo? Remember this diagram we have drawn, plasma membrane structure? Phospholipid bilayer thakibo, hekarone lipid soluble hole easily eta jekar pra antu jekale carry koribo pari, kintu hydrophilic hole tahandor problem hoy. So as a result, what we have written, hydrophilic substances do not pass through a biological membrane by simple diffusion, but in normal cases majority of the things that we intake is always hydrophilic. Kiba ta dorob khabo lage, kiba glucose khabo lage, ami kihot milai pelai khao, it's always in water that we mix it and then we have it, right? In spite of knowing the fact that water milale easily pass no hoy, আমি যে দৰৱ এটা খাইছোঁ বা গ্লুক'জ খাইছোঁ when we are feeling less in energy, সেই গ্লুক'জখিনি কিহৰ কাৰণে খাইছোঁ so that it can reach each and every cell of our body. And if it has to go from each and every cell, it has to cover or it has to pass through the membrane also. But since it's hydrophilic, easily to pass নহয় বা simple diffusion pass নহয়, তো তাহাঁতক এটা special diffusion লাগিব. সেই special diffusionটোৰ নাম কি আছিলে? Facilitated diffusion, right? And when we talk about facilitated diffusion, what we understand? কোনোবাই সেই diffusion process to facilitate কৰিছে, তাৰ মানে help কৰিছে, right? কোনে help কৰে? Certain types of এটা substance আছিলে, substance এটা cellৰ পৰা আনটো cellলৈ যাব লাগে, right? So he hydrophilic substance হয়, so যাব নোৱাৰে, so তাক ভিতৰলৈ সোমাব লাগিলে কোনোবাই help কৰিব লাগিব নালাগে. So যদি কাবাৰ help লৈ পেলাই, if the process of diffusion occurs, that is what is called as FD or facilitated diffusion. Now the point is, who helps in diffusing? It is certain types of protein molecules. I think you have heard a word called as carrier proteins. Carrier proteins, transmembrane proteins, transport proteins, এইবিলাকে কি কৰে? Help কৰে এটা বস্তু আনটো cellলৈ সোমাবলৈ, right? And that process is called as FD. Facilitate spelling ভুল হৈছে ন? FACI LATED S night facilitated diffusion, facilitate diffusion, FD, FACI LITAED, LATED, TATED, facilitate, হৈছে নে? নে এইবাৰো হোৱা নাই? Okay. TATED. Porine is something that we have studied during cell also, no? Organically, I mean, cell pori asilu. Remember, we have talked about endosymbiont of bacteria. Statement to Montasane, chloroplast and mitochondria are considered as endosymbiont of bacteria because they have certain similarities with bacteria, and the people are of opinion that maybe chloroplast and mitochondria have an origin from the prokaryote or from bacteria itself. So, since they have certain similarities, what was one similarity that we have talked about is the presence of porine. Bacterial cell wall to ase, mitochondria to ase, chloroplast to ase, right? Porines bilak ki hoy, nothing but protein pores through which exchange of substances takes place across cell to cell. Kenuka dhoroner substances? Hydrophilic substances. A diagram to NCERT book দিয়া আছে so A diagram to পৰা questions আহে ঠিক আছে question to কেনেকে আহিব যে এইবিলাক বস্তু দিয়া নাথাকিব and you have to identify which process is called as what right so we have three conditions that is symport antiport and uniport when you are going to observe this condition when two or different substances move across the membrane at the same time so here in the diagram we are talking about two substances A and B so what does the diagram talk about it talks about in the first case symport ketia when A and B travels in the same direction, no? So, yate ki hobo lagibo se A travels this side B also travels this side. So they have a relation. A jodi epine jabo tetia hole B hepine jabo. So they have a relation between them and both of them move in the same direction, that is called a sympode. Talking about this process, obviously antipode, one is moving to one direction, the other is moving to the other direction. In this case also A and B has a relation. What is the relation? If A goes to the right, B will go to the left. So B is dependent on what? A, right? So here also they have a relation, here also they have a relation, but in certain cases it might be unipode. Unipode hole duita ako sympode hobo pare, antipode hobo pare. Ketiaba duita ekelekeo jabo pare, ketiaba duita ultakeo jabo pare, ketiaba okol etao jabo pare. Jedi unipode eta gol no, etu side so second to thaki gol, suppose A epine gusi gol, B thaki gol, B will decide jedi hepine jai goi tetela condition to kami sympode buliye kom, jedi ulta pine gusi jai tel ta ami kom antipode ekdom distinctly enekwa no hoy ha constant thakibo ha. So diagram to saba NCERT bookot ase, so etu diagram ami follow koribo lebo. Yeah, please say. Dependent নহয়, dependent নহয়, dependent নহয়. যদি বিউ হেতু সাথে যাই গৈ তেতিয়াহলে প্ৰসেসটো আমি কি বুলি কম, সিম্পোর্ট কৈ দিম, ৰাইট? ইয়াতে যেনেকে একদম পুৰা ডিস্টিংক্টলি ডিপেন্ডেন্সিটো দেখা পাইছো, ইয়াতে আমি দেখা নাপাও। ওকে, এ গৈছে, বি নাযাবও পাৰে, যাবও পাৰে, সেম ডাইৰেকশনতো যাব পাৰে, অপোজিট ডাইৰেকশনতো যাব পাৰে। ওকে? Right? So this is all about the first short distance transport jihere hoy no, the first physical process, that is diffusion, that we have to talk about. Diffusion examples aba, significance aba, ehini saba, and then we have talked about DP or diffusion pressure. Together with that, DPDU poribo lagibo. Diffusion pressure deficit is supposed to be the most important part of diffusion part, right? But DPD is something that we are not going to discuss now. Ami ketia discuss korim, osmosis jani lobo lagibo, tar pisathe ami DPD discuss koribo parim. So the next topic that we will be discussing is osmosis. So heading osmosis kora, let's start a little bit. What is osmosis? It is a special type of diffusion. Osmosis to ki hoy, diffusion hoy, kintu special type. Special type ki ho karone koise, because there are certain conditions involved. First, it is the movement of only the solvent molecules or liquid molecules. Second, it always requires a semi-permeable membrane. Ekon special membrane lagibo tetiahe osmosis hobo. Because of all these reasons, it's called as a special type of diffusion. Next, it is, whenever we talk about osmosis, it is a movement again. Ki move koribo, molecules and ions. Again, we have to talk about the concentration. From a region of low concentration to a region of higher concentration, no? So osmosis ami keneke denote koru, low to high, across. Right? Low concentration to high concentration, right? Across a semi-permeable membrane. Akko hi question to ahile, low concentration of what? High concentration of what? Low concentration of solutes to high concentration of solutes. Duta jega ase, yate solutes kom ase, yate solutes besi ase. Right? So ki hobo, water to obviously thakiboi, yar pra yale jabo, right? Jote solute besi. Anyhow, in this entire chapter, either we are talking about osmosis, or we are talking about DPD, or we'll be talking about water potential gradient. The one and only line that you have to remember in this entire chapter is, where will the liquid move? The liquid will always move to the area where there is more solute. Junto celote solute besi, tate pani to jabo. Either you can discuss in terms of DPD or you can discuss in terms of water potential gradient also. Duita case ote etai statement jedi cell to solute besi hi hodai pani lobo, right? Definition to nalage, understood. Okay, so since we are talking about osmosis, we know this time we are talking about the movement of liquid only, right? Okol water boli koa nai, it could be any form of a liquid, not solid, not interested. Now, since we are talking about liquid, liquid or logo duta terms ase, eta hol solvent, eta hol solution. Solvent is also a liquid, solution is also a liquid. So you have to remember what will move from where. Solvent will move to solution, the solution will move to solvent. During osmosis, it's always a solvent that moves to the solution chamber. Right? Duta liquid, duitai liquid. So solvent to move koribo pare, solution to move koribo pare. Ekdom precisely janibo lagibo je kuntu move kore. Solvent solution ole jai, the solution solvent ole jai. It's always a pure solvent that will go to the solution. What is the reason behind? Solution will have the solid particles and obviously solvent or solute nai, he karne ki hoy tole ahi jay. Next is dilute to concentrated. Concentrated ki ho karne karon solute basic e thake. Right. Next is water potential gradient, we have not discussed. So maybe you don't know, but if you have read before, then you will understand that duta cell ase high to low, water potential hodai high to low jai. Aru DPD just the ulta, low to high jai. Duta cell ase one half, suppose the DPD 5 and the other has DPD 10. To kole jabo 5 or pra 10 ole jabo, basi deficit thaka cell to le jabo. Kintu water potential gradient is just the opposite. It always goes from high to low. If a cell has 10 water potential, another cell has 5 water potential, pani to kole jabo 10 or pra 5 ole jabo, right? Just the opposite. We'll be discussing in details later. Next is high free energy of water. This is also a concept that is related with water potential gradient. Gute water potential gradient to kihor upor depend, it depends on the water molecules. Water molecules, free water molecules ketia koiso jetia tar solutes nathake. solutes থাকিলে তাক আমি free বুলি নকওঁ so the solventত যোনবিলাক water molecules থাকে বা যোনবিলাক liquid molecules থাকে তাহাঁতৰ কি থাকিব energy বেছি থাকিব as compared to the liquid molecules present in a solution right so এই দুটা part আমি water potentials যেতিয়া discuss কৰিম at that time we will be discussing as of now you have to be sure about these two words dilute to concentrated solvent to solution right next is another line about osmosis where can you see osmosis it is not only in the living cells that you see in non living cells also you see the osmosis as far as the experimental evidence is concerned someone needs to prove it right the osmosis yato hoise living auto hoise non living auto hoise living ot okay non living ot keneke hoise you don't have to remember nothing eta ki korise beaker loise eta thistle funnel loise right cover kori dise water ase low concentration high concentration ekon ki hoy semi permeable membrane right this is the experimental setup after some time ki hobo two liquids no since we are talking about osmosis so yato liquid thakibo libo yato liquid thakibo this area is of low concentration yate ki hobo concentrated or highly high concentration so if there is two water source differentiated or divided or distinguished differentiated by a semi permeable membrane so water molecules bilake ki koribo low concentration or high concentration jabo so if this is the experimental setup olop pisot ami keneke dekha pam just a rough idea you don't have to draw nothing just you have to understand so etia water level to ekhin loke ase if this continues tetela water level to yale ahi jabo na jay yes it will increase so this increase talks about what osmosis has taken place right osmosis and non living bostu to hoy he bostu to ami kiba ta experiment kori pelai to dekhabo lagibo hoy na osmosis to okal living ot no hoy non living on hoy non living discuss korute ami ki loiso eta beaker loiso beaker ot water buli nako liquid loiso liquid with low concentrated liquid eta thistle funnel loiso funnel to ami ki koriso funnel hole ekhon to ami cover koribo lagibo no so cover ki hore koriso ekhon membrane ere আৰু funnel টোৰ ভিতৰটো liquid এটা আছে কিন্তু it's highly concentrated so low concentrated highly concentrated separated by a semi permeable membrane কি হ'ব entry of water হ'ব নহয় য'ত বেছি concentration থাকে তালে পানীটো সোমাই যাব না যায় so পানীটো যে সোমাই গল কেনেকৈ গম পাম ইয়াৰ লেভেলটো অৰিজিনাল লেভেল এটো আছিল অলপ দেৰি পিছত ইয়াৰ লেভেলটো বাঢ়ি গৈছে নাই so bahi kiho karone goise osmosis or karone goise so this proves what osmosis takes place in non living things also this was just one experiment to show that osmosis non living substance to hoy right similarly there is an explanation for living substance to osmosis hoy in that case the experiment that was conducted was of a potato tuber hebilak bostu mane just you take a potato tuber dig a cavity put it in liquid right yate ki disile salt protomote salt right this was the first step so this is high this is the low concentration this is the high concentration low to high right high mane ki etu to baru potato tuber second dot ki hobo if you are talking about this potato tuber first dot ki asile salt moisture or karone salt solution hoi jabo na jay right etu beaker to already asile etu keneko asile low concentration asile salt of jetia salt water hoi jabo etu high concentration hobo nohoy first step of low high ami eku discuss kora nai we have taken a beaker with concentration right and we have taken a potato tuber in the potato tuber we have marked a cavity and in the cavity we have put salt right second step of a salt khini ki hole convert hoi jabo water le because of the humidity third dot ki hobo salt ekhin loke asile third dot ki hobo if this is the potato if this is the cavity the water will rise high yate cavity tut ekhin loke pani asile pisot cavity tur pura full hoi gol full kiyo hoi gol konobai absorb korise right absorb ki korise etu absorb korise so this experiment talks about the statement osmosis for karone yato level to increase hoise osmosis or karone yato level to increase hoise increase ki hoise karon absorption hoise Absorption by which process? Absorption by osmosis. In this case, we have said that this is the semi-permeable membrane. In this case, if this is osmosis, tetiahole semi-permeable membrane lagibo. Which one? The potato itself. Right? Any biological membrane. Right? In this case, ekhone ki hisabe kaam korise? Semi-permeable membrane hisabe korise. It's only taking the liquid and not the solute. Living substance. Right? So, these two experiments shows that osmosis can occur both in living substance as well as in non-living substance. Not very important, khali A line to mone rakhile hoi gol. Right? For the next class, types of osmosis heading kori thoi dia. Ako types of osmosis on endo-osmosis, exo-osmosis janu. Solution ase hypertonic, isotonic, right? And hypotonic. Hekini ami next class discuss korim. I think that's all for today. Thank you.